For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is John Young. I'm the Dean of Admissions here at Hobart and William Smith, and thank you for spending some time with us this morning, and hope that the sessions today gave you a really nice overview of the colleges. For those of you who have the opportunity and are living in states that aren't COVID restricted from New York, we also welcome you to come to visit campus. We've been open since July for individual family campus tours. We schedule them on the half an hour. We have a tour guide for each family so that they can leave and walk around campus by themselves and get a good sense talking with one of our student guides of all the things that are going on here. So we welcome that. They're offered Monday through Friday during the business day and on Saturday mornings. So we encourage you to come to campus if you're able. One of the things that I think is really important for all of you is to really talk about next steps. What happens from here? And for us, the obvious answer to that is apply. But I want to talk a little bit about the application and how we review them, so you can get a sense of what might be important to us as you submit them to us. So first, we read every application twice. Two different people are going to review your application for admission. And I think that's important because we want to make sure that somebody's reviewing your application who knows your high school, knows where you're coming from, has probably visited there and read applications from there in the past. The reason for that is it really helps put your application in context. One of the things that has always been a challenge for our prospective students is wondering, do we really know their high school? Do we know what the grades mean? Do we know what courses are offered? And the quick answer to your question is yes. But if for some reason we don't, if there's a student, we're reviewing an application from their high school and it's the first time we've seen one, we're going to pick up the phone and call the school. We're going to look at something called the high school profile that every school sends us with their student's application to help us understand what courses are offered, what's the grading system, where are students going off to college. That will help us tremendously. But we also read every document that is sent to us. If you send it, we'll review it. It's not something that we pass over or take lightly. So let me encourage you to really think about the application and make sure you're sending us all the critical information that you want us to have. I've got two tips for you in particular when it comes to applying to Hobart and William Smith. One of my fears is that students undervalue the role that recommendations can play in our process. I think for most students, it's hard for anybody to imagine getting a teacher recommendation or a counselor recommendation from a student, from a professional who doesn't like you, and that it's this horrible recommendation that we're going to review. Rarely does that happen. Almost all the application recommendations we receive are very positive. But I do believe there's some that jump out more than others. And the key element there is making sure that you choose teachers who know you well as a student. Sometimes I think people make a mistake by finding that teacher who's a good buddy of theirs, but may not really know what you're like inside the classroom. And I think that's a critical element of something that we're trying to see when we review those teacher recommendations. It doesn't really matter what grade you received. What matters is how well can this teacher speak to your learning style, to your approach to things? What happened when you hit roadblocks? The best sort of test I have for that might be helpful to you. Take any class you're in high school. There's probably a student in your English class that gets the same exact grade that you receive, but you got it in a very different way than she may have. You might be the one who writes these great papers that the teacher wants to put at the bottom of the pile to read last, or put first to start things off on a high note. Or you might be the student that maybe isn't the great writer, but knows how to ask terrific questions in class and pushes the course discussion in a new direction. Well, we need both of those students on our campus, but we wouldn't know which ones we're getting unless we had recommendations that speak to that. So in other words, if there's somebody who's sitting in your class and gets the same grade that you do, but the teacher could write very different recommendations for the two of you, that's probably a great person to ask. We ask for one teacher recommendation, but feel free to send more if you so choose. And I think that can really help round out an application. The second thing I want to talk about from an application perspective is the role standardized testing plays in our decision-making process. We've been a test optional school now for 14 years. It's nothing new for us. And I know with the advent of the COVID pandemic that a lot of colleges have moved to a test optional application review process. I think what's great about HWS is we're used to this. This is nothing new for us. We know how to read and evaluate applications without test scores. What is a little new for us, though, is the way that we've described this plan, and I think it's an important one for you all to know. We've always been test optional. That's fantastic, but I think sometimes students wonder what role those tests are going to play for us in our evaluation process. We decided to make it very clear to students this year that standardized test scores will never harm a candidate's chances for admission here. We call it our no harm standardized testing policy. There are some students for whom test scores are really helpful and they help us make a smart decision, and we want those students to be able to submit them and use them in the process. There are other students for whom their test scores are really a poor indicator of their skills and abilities to be successful. And in that case, we won't use those test scores, even if you send them to us, even if we get them by accident. So we want to make sure everybody doesn't spend any time worrying about the role that standardized test scores will play in the process. If you want us to have them, please send them, we'll use them. And if we think they're going to harm your chances, we'll take them out of your file and not consider them when we read your application. But if we think they could help, we'll leave them there and certainly use them as we move through the evaluation process. The last thing I want to mention about the application is the importance of the interview at Hobart and William Smith. Fewer and fewer colleges are using interviews when they evaluate candidates, and we have found for us they give us a really good opportunity to ask thoughtful questions of the students that we're meeting with. At the same time, it gives students a chance to ask us questions because we're both trying to determine whether this is a good match. You're trying to figure out where the best place to spend the next 4 years of your education will be. We're trying to build a community here of great students and scholars. They're going to make Hobart and William Smith an even better place than it already is. We believe an interview is a terrific way to do that. So actually, I'm going to put out in the chat a couple of links to web pages for us. That I think will be really helpful for you as you try to move through the next steps. The first is a link to our apply page, which will give you dates and deadlines for you to remember. The next is a link to our virtual interview page where you can register for a virtual interview. And the last is a link to our admissions staff page. Depending on where you're from in the United States or around the world, we have a different staff member who will work with you, and that page will give you a sense of where we all are. The next thing for you just to keep in mind are some dates and some deadlines. If you go through this search process and you realize that Hobart and William Smith is where you want to be, no questions asked, we do have an early decision plan. It's a binding agreement if students are admitted under the early decision plan and they receive the finances that they need to attend the colleges, you'll be coming here. You'll be the next member of the Hobart and William Smith classes of 2025. The deadline for early decision round 1 is November 15th, and we promise students a response by December 15th. We have a second round of early decision for students whom it might take a little more time to reach that conclusion. That deadline is January 15th. We give answers by February 15th. Our regular decision deadline is February 1st. And then we'll promise a response to all students by April 1, but we're usually a good bit faster than that and try to send out our decision letters in early March. So those are the deadlines. Those are the deadlines for your admissions application. Those are the deadlines for your financial aid materials to be sent. They're also the deadline for merit scholarship applications. So whichever round you're applying for, that's when all the forms need to be submitted for us. And you can see if you get to that staff page, you can find connections and links to all of our staff contact information. Please don't hesitate to ask any questions. If you've got questions for me at this moment, please feel free to type them in the chat and I'll respond as best I can, or certainly feel free to unmute your microphone and ask me any questions about the application process. I think we really want our students to feel as though we're a resource through this process. I think sometimes students view the college admissions application as a quiz that you either pass or fail. And we really want to use this process as a vehicle to get to know you better and feel as though we're making decisions with the best information that we have. So I've got a couple of questions here in the chat. First, what point in the application process do you do an interview? From our perspective, any point that makes sense for you. Up until our application deadline of February 1st, we will schedule interviews throughout the process. So you can do that at any point. We interview students the same way, whether they've applied or not. And people are doing it regularly throughout the week right now. Make sure when you go to that page, right now the calendar is set for October, but if you hit a forward arrow button, you'll see the November dates. We've got lots of different times that you can schedule interviews. Do we need to take an English proficiency exam even if you've studied English as your second language since elementary school? That's done on an individual basis. Right now, our policy is that we require all students for whom English is a second language to submit an English proficiency exam, but we can waive that upon recommendation from guidance counselors, from conversations. So make sure you work with your individual admissions officer and we can help you navigate that. What percentage of the class is admitted through early decision? In any given year, we can be somewhere between 37 and 48% of the class coming through early decision. That's just based on the quality of the pool. We don't set goals or targets for what percentage of our class will come through early decision. We look at the applicants, review them. If we think they're a good fit and a good match, we'll admit them. We do have about a 10% higher acceptance rate for our early decision candidates compared to our regular decision candidates. That's usually simply because there's all the room in the class at that moment in time, as opposed to regular decision where we've admitted a chunk of the class already. We have fewer spots available and have to be slightly more selective at that moment in time. But to me, easy for me to say, because I'm sitting where I sit, as opposed to where you all sit as students. Let this process run out, go through it, make sure you've done your homework and your research. If you've figured out your list of schools that you want to apply to, here are the 7 schools that I'm really thinking about applying to. To me, the question you should ask yourself is, if you were admitted to all 7, is Hobart William Smith where you'd want to be? If the answer is yes, that's when you think about applying early decision. I think sometimes people go to this process and too quickly jump on the early decision bandwagon and don't do some self-reflection and evaluation first. I think that's a really important thing. All right, any other questions before we wrap things up today?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about arts portfolios, and I was wondering, since like arts is a really important part of my high school career so far, but it's not necessarily something I want to continue as a career maybe. If there was a way to include that in my application that wasn't so binding, like a major or something like that.
Sure. Let me talk about that 2 ways. I think you've got 2 options, Ruby. Number 1, you should know we do have a series of merit scholarships in the fine and performing arts. You could submit your portfolio while applying for a scholarship that way. None of those programs require you to major or minor in those areas. The only expectation we have is if a student receives one of our arts scholarships is that they will be engaged in the arts in some way, shape, or form while they're here at the colleges. So for example, a student could receive an arts scholarship in dance, not be a dance major, not be a dance minor, maybe take a dance class here or there, or they could be involved in our student dance collective, Kashari. Same is true for music or for fine arts. So certainly something worth considering for you. And then you would submit that portfolio through SlideRoom. That would go into our admissions application and be forwarded to the faculty in those areas for review. The other thing you can simply do, if you're not interested in applying for one of those merit scholarships, but you'd like the admissions staff to see the work you do, is send that off to your admissions officer. They'll make sure to add that to your file. So that'll be a part of our admissions review. That's a great question, Ruby, because I think for some students, there's just a part of their life that's really important and they want us to know about. And there may not be a checkbox for that on the application or a place to include that information that's obvious. We want it. We want it to be part of getting to know you better. So please send that stuff along. We've never reached this moment in my time here at the colleges where we felt like we had too much information about a student. Anything else before we wrap things up? I think we've answered all of the questions in the chat. You've got links there. Let me scan this one more time and make sure we're good. Excellent. All right. I think we've covered everything. But thank you so much for getting to know us a little bit better today, spending this time with us. Please don't ever hesitate to reach out if we can be helpful to you as you navigate this process. If you've got more specific questions that you want to get answered from any member of our staff, from financial aid, from our faculty, from our current students, we're happy to pair you up with them. As we talked about first thing this morning, and you can see above my head, our tagline, "You're thinking about your future, so are we." And that doesn't just mean about life after the colleges, it means the next 4 years while you're here. So we're happy to be a resource to you as you manage your way through this process. Thank you so much. We appreciate the time, and please stay in touch with us. We look forward to spending time with you in the future.